Hello, my name's Marianne McShane. I'm an author and a storyteller, and I'm very excited to be here with you today and very thankful that Meath County Library invited me to come and tell you about my first book, Rónán the Mermaid. Now, I live all the way up in the northeast coast of Ireland. I live in Bangor, County Down. And they say that there's a legend here that back in the 6th century, Comgall, our saint, baptized a mermaid. So I want to tell the story and read the story of the Bangor mermaid to the families and children listening in Meath. So here it is, Rónán and the Mermaid. Now, it's long for a picture book, so what I'll probably do is read you the pages and then turn it around so you can see the beautiful illustrations by Geordie Solano. Long ago in Ireland, when fairy folk dwelt in the hills and merfolk swam in the seas, saints and holy men lived in little beehive huts scattered along lonely shores. These huts of wattle and thatch were the first abbeys. The ancient abbey of Bangor lay nestled on the edge of the Irish Sea, and there the monks worked and played, their companions the seagulls flying in the winds and the seals basking on the rocks. Now one day, after a wild storm, Brother Declan was searching for driftwood when he came upon a circle of seals keening softly on the sands. In their midst lay a young boy, wisps of seaweed tangled in his hair and his eyes closed tight. He was wrapped in a shawl woven from seagrass, and a silver ring glistened in his outstretched hand. Well, Declan looked up the beach and down, but there was no one in sight. He gazed over the water and glimpsed a flash of gold that shimmered by the great grey rocks. The old monk rubbed his eyes and looked again, but saw only white foam and swirling waves. The lines in his forehead deepened as he remembered the old tales of mermaids and sea people. He gathered the boy in his arms, slipped the ring into the pocket of his cloak, and hurried back to the abbey. I found him with the seals, he told the curious monks, and saying no more, he laid the boy in a bed of rushes and tucked the shawl around him. Brother Finbar kindled the fire till it crackled and sparked, and hung a basin of milk over the flickering flames. Brother Kevin unlaced his pouch of healing herbs and sprinkled a handful onto the frothy white bubbles. The room warmed with the scent of sage and rosemary. Abbot Comgall himself came and dipped his fingers in a cup of holy water and blessed the child. Declan blew gently on the milk to cool it and held a spoonful to the boy's lips. With the first sip, the colour returned to his cheeks. With the second, he opened his eyes, and with the third, he eased himself up, and he glanced wildly around the room and began pulling and tugging at his clothes. And then he sank back on the rushes and sighed in despair. Declan dug deep into his pocket and held out the ring. The boy's eyes widened. He reached for the ring and clasped it tight. He turned it over in his palm and he wondered at the tiny L engraved upon it. She gave it to me, he said, the lady with the golden hair. And he told him his name was Rónán, and that he'd been out fishing with his father when the storm blew in. They turned back to shore and tried to outrace the wind, but the waves caught them and tossed them out of their boat into the cold, wet darkness. My father could hold me no longer. I was swept out of his arms. And then the lady came. I thought it was a big fish, but her hair was long and golden, and she sang to me till we reached the shore. Rónán's eyes closed, and his voice grew softer. She pressed the ring into my hands and told me that one day I would help her. Brother Finbar and Brother Declan looked at each other and shook their heads. They thought for sure it was a fever talking. Brother Declan was not so sure. He thought of the sudden flash of gold by the rocks, and he remembered the legend of Liban, the princess turned into a mermaid. He kept his thoughts to himself. Let the boy sleep, he said. He's feverish and needs rest. Rónán didn't wake till the moon set and the sun rose. Day by day, the boy's strength returned. Brother Finbar brought him a speckled egg every morning for nourishment, and Brother Kevin strewed herbs under his pillow to cure the fever. And Brother Declan tied the silver ring on a linen cord and fastened it around Rónán's neck for safekeeping. And in the evenings, Brother Declan would tell the boy tales while the candle burned low. He told him about Selkies, the seal people, who shed their skins on full moon nights and take on human shape. He told him about Liban, the mermaid, who had been a princess until a great lake flooded her home and drowned all who lived there. For 300 years, she had roamed the lonesome seas. No one has ever seen her, the old monk said, but her singing has entered many a dream on quiet, moonlit nights. Rónán's fingers strayed to the silver ring. In his heart, he knew it was Liban who had saved him. As Rónán grew stronger still and his sorrow eased, he began to help with the daily chores. Brother Finbar gave him a basket of willow and showed him where the broody hens hid their eggs under the bushes by the old oak. Rónán set out each morning with his basket swinging on his arm, but when he heard the blackbirds singing in the treetops, he would stretch out in the long grass and close his eyes to listen. The brothers ate breakfast late on those days. Brother Kevin gave him a little clay jar with its very own lid and showed him where the wild herbs grew by the shore. Rónán filled the jar till leaves spilled over the sides. He squeezed the lid on tight and ran down to the water's edge, racing the seagulls and splashing in the waves. But when he heard the seals singing out by the great grey rocks, he would sit down on the wet sand and listen, hoping to hear the mermaid's song. Now Brother Declan had seen the boy entranced by the song of the blackbird. He had watched him sit for long hours watching the seals, and so he gave him the gift of music. A harp he fashioned himself, made from hazelwood and strung with silver. He showed Rónán how to balance it on his knees and cradle it against his shoulder. Rónán gazed at the harp in wonder, sliding his hand along the polished wood, tracing the flowers and animals carved in the sides. His fingers trembled onto the strings, slipping up and down the length of them. And then he pressed into the silver wires, pulled them towards him and let go, and when he did, music filled the air, pure and sweet as the peal of crystal bells. Abbot Comgall himself came to listen. Rónán kept the harp with him always. His melodies could soothe with the hush of the sleep song, fill the heart with joy or soften sorrow with the pluck of a single harp string. When he played under the old oak, the blackbirds sang in the treetops, and when he played by the shore, The seals came up in the sands to listen, but the melody he yearned for was the song of the mermaid. One night, when the wind was still and moonlight danced into his hut, Rónán was awakened by a sweet yet sorrowful singing that floated in from the sea. It was the song hidden deep in his heart. It was the song of the mermaid. He reached for his harp and sent the song ringing back to sea, and all that moonlit night, harp song and sea song echoed over the waves. In the morning, he went to Abbot Congal. "Let me row out today and catch fish for our supper." Congal understood the longing in the boy's eyes and gave him his blessing. Rónán tucked the harp into its soft leather bag, stowed it safely in the curragh, and rowed out far beyond the great grey rocks, where the seals lay watching. He cast his nets and then began to play, and as the notes floated upwards, waves rippled to the melody, and gulls hovered over the little boat. A lonesome song came in reply, faint at first, and then stronger. With a cry of joy, Rónán let go the harp and rushed to pull up his nets. Entangled in the mesh was a beautiful girl with long golden hair and a silvery tail. "Liban," he murmured. "Yes," she answered. "Your singing has softened my sorrow. Now you can help me. For 300 years I've been adrift with no shelter from the wild seas. Take me to your holy abbot so that I may have his blessing and find peace." Rónán leaned over, took a firm grasp and pulled her into the boat. The little curragh pitched from side to side, and the harp of hazelwood was flung out into the water. He watched it sink down to the land under wave and become part of the sea. And though his heart grieved at losing it, there was no sacrifice he would not make to help Liban. Rónán rowed back as fast as he could, seawater lapping in his boat and Liban floating in it. Brother Declan and Brother Kevin were waiting on the shore with Abbot Congal, for they too had heard the singing. They watched in wonder as the boy and the mermaid drew closer. "You are a fisher of souls," Congal said, and he stepped into the cold waves and blessed Liban. He christened her Morgan, which means born of the sea, and in later years she became known as the Mermaid Saint. Rónán continued to fish every day. Liban kept him safe on the sea, and the seals guided him to the best fishing places. He became known as a great fisherman, for his nets were always full, and the monks never went hungry. Brother Declan carved him a new harp in the shape of a mermaid. And Rónán became known as a wondrous harper, for he could soothe with the hush of the sleep song, fill the heart with joy, or soften sorrow with the pluck of a single harp string. But more wonderful still, he could charm the merfolk up from the waves, for when he played his harp on full moon nights, the sea people danced on the sands, and Liban sang her songs of the sea. And so that's my story of Rónán and the Mermaid, and I hope you enjoyed it. Bye.